In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these granny style crochet stars. They only take 3 rounds to create, and you can do them in a solid color like these, or you can even change the color for each round. And then you can get this granny style star that has multiple colors. Or what we're going to do today in this tutorial is I'm going to show you how to make the red solid crochet granny style star. And then at the end, if you want to stay tuned, I will show you how I did the color changes if you want to do one with the multiple colors. And I'm going to use a size J or 10 6mm crochet hook to make my granny star today. Okay, so we're going to start off with a magic ring. So I already have 1 chain from the magic ring, so I'm going to go ahead and chain 2 more. And those 3 chains will count as my first double crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and do 2 more double crochets into the center of the magic ring. Since I'm counting the first chain 3, and then I did 2 double crochets, that means I have my 3 double crochets, since that does count as a stitch. And now I'm going to chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets into the center of the magic ring. And then I'm going to chain 2 and do 3 more double crochets into the center of the magic ring. Then chain 2. Then I'm going to do 3 more double crochets into the center of the magic ring. Okay, so far I have 4 groups of 3 double crochets with a chain 2 in between. And then I want to have a total of 5 groups of 3 double crochets. So I need 1 more set of 3. So I just finished my 3 double crochets. I'm going to chain 2, and I'm going to do 3 double crochets into the center of the magic ring. Okay, so I now have my 5 sets of 3 double crochets. So now I'm going to do the chain 2, and I'm going to join with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3 that we did when we began the round. But first, I'm going to go ahead and pull the tail of the magic ring to close up that center circle. And I'm going to join with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3 that we did when we began the round. Okay, so that completes round 1. So you should have 5 groups of 3 double crochets with the chain 2 in between each group of 3 when you're finished with this round. Okay, so now we need to slip stitch over to that chain 2 space. We're going to slip stitch into the top of the next 2 double crochets, and then do a slip stitch into that chain 2 space. Now we're going to go ahead and chain 3. That chain 3 will count as a double crochet, so we're going to do 2 more double crochets into that chain 2 space. And then we want to chain 2, and then we're going to do 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. So we should have a total of 6 double crochets with the chain 2 in between in the middle when we're done with this stitch. So all of those stitches were into that same chain 2 space. So just to recap what we did into that chain 2 space: 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 more double crochets. Now we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to work into the next chain 2 space. So we're not going to be working into the tops of these double crochets. We're just going to be skipping right over into that next chain 2 space. We're going to do 3 double crochets, chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. So just like we did for the other chain 2 space, it's exactly the same. And then chain 2, we're skipping over the double crochets. We're not working into the tops of the double crochets. We're going to move over right to that chain 2 space. We're going to do the same thing we did in the last chain 2 spaces that we just did, where we do 3 double crochets. Chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets right back into that same chain 2 space. So you should have 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 more double crochets all into the same chain 2 space. And then we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to find the next chain 2 space and do the same thing. 3 double crochets, chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets into the same chain 2 space. And then we're going to chain 2 and find the next chain 2 space and do 3 double crochets, chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. Okay, so that was the last chain 2 space for round 2. So we're going to go ahead and chain 2. And then we're going to do a slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 space that we did when we began the round. So that completes round 2. So when you're done with round 2, you should have 6 double crochets in each chain 2 space with a chain 2 in between it. So for each chain 2 space, what we did, 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets, all into the chain 2 space. So you should have 5 groups of the 6 double crochets with the chain 2 in the center of the 6 double crochets. So we want to have 5 points to our star, so you should have 5. Okay? So now, for round 3, we need to work in the first chain 2 space. So we're going to do slip stitches over to the chain 2 space. So we need to do a slip stitch in the next 2 double crochets. So we're doing a slip stitch into the top of the 2 double crochets, and then we're going to do a slip stitch in to the chain 2 space. Okay, so to begin, we're going to chain 3. That chain 3 will count as our first double crochet, and then we're going to go ahead and do 2 double crochets into that same chain 2 space. And then we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to do 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. Okay, so that's one of the points of the stars. And then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to do a slip stitch into the next chain 2 space. And now we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to find the next chain 2 space, and we're going to do 3 double crochets into that chain 2 space. And then chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. So that's the second point of the star. So now we just finished the second point of the star, so we're going to chain 1, and then there's a chain 2 space before we get to the next point of the star. So that's essentially like the side here. So we're going to do a slip stitch into that chain 2 space before we get to the next point of the star. And then we're going to chain 1, and here's the next point of the star. So we're going to do our 3 double crochets into that chain 2 space. And we're going to chain 2 and do 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. Okay, that completes the third point of our star. And then you can see there's a chain 2 space here before we get to the next point. Okay, and then we're going to chain 1, and then you can see there's a chain 2 space here before we get to the next point of the star. So we're going to do a slip stitch into that chain 2 space, and then we're going to chain 1, and then here's the next point of the star. So we're going to do our 3 double crochets into that chain 2 space, and then chain 2, and then we're going to do 3 more double crochets right back into that same chain 2 space. So there's the 4th point of the star. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and chain 1, and then there's a chain 2 space before I get to the last point of the star. So I'm going to do a slip stitch into that chain 2 space that's on the side. That's the chain 2 space in between the points of the stars. So I'm doing a slip stitch there. And then I'm going to chain 1. Okay, and then I'm going to work into the next chain 2 space, which is the point of the star. I'm going to go ahead and do my 3 double crochets into that chain 2 space. I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to do 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. And then I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to do a slip stitch into that chain 2 space, and then chain 1, and then I'm going to do a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3 that we did when we began the round. And that completes our granny style crochet star. Doesn't it look cute? So for this round, what we did is in each point of the star, we did a total of 6 double crochets with a chain 2 in the center. So what we did is 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 more double crochets all into the same chain 2 space for the point of the star. And then there's a chain 2 space in between the points of the star. That's where we did a slip stitch into that chain 2 space. So that completes a granny style crochet star. So now all that's left to do is to cut our yarn so we can fasten off. I'm going to go ahead and yarn over and pull that tail through and give it a tug to fasten off. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the camera on pause while I weave in the tails. And when I'm done weaving in the tails, I'll meet you back here to show you what it looks like. Okay, so while I had the camera on pause, I went ahead and finished weaving in the tails for my granny style crochet star. I really like how it came out, and I think it looks just adorable. And I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial today. And if you would like to see how I did the color changes for each round, go ahead and continue watching, and I will show you how to make one with the color changes. And I won't go through every single step. I'll just go through the rounds kind of quickly, but you will it will be the same exact way. It's just each round we will change the colors. I just wanted to go ahead and show you how I did the color changes. That way, if anyone who is new to crocheting and has not had much experience with color changes, because I know that can be tricky for someone who's new to crocheting, so I did want to go ahead and go over that as well. So go ahead and continue watching if you would like to see how I did the color changes. Okay, so with the same size crochet hook, the size J or 10, 6mm crochet hook, this time I'm going to start off with the color red. So to begin, we're going to start the same way we did the solid one with the magic ring. We already have that loop on there from the magic ring, so we're going to chain 2 more. Do the 2 double crochets. So we have 2 double crochets in the chain 3, chain 2, 3 double crochets, chain 2. So what you're going to do is you're going to have 5 sets or 5 groups of 3 double crochets with a chain 2 in between each one. So I'll just go ahead and do that real quickly. That will be for round 1. So I just did the last group of 3. This is the 5th group of 3. So now I'm going to do my chain 2, and then I'm going to join with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3 that we did when we began the round. So now I'm going to pull the center tail here for the magic ring to close it up. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we need to slip stitch over to that chain 2 space here. So I'm going to slip stitch into the top of the next 2 double crochets. Okay, and now we're here with a, we're going to slip stitch into the chain 2 space. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook to start my slip stitch, but I am not going to use the same yarn to yarn over to pull it through. So I'm just going to insert my hook into the chain 2 space to start my slip stitch. So I have my hook inserted into that chain 2 space where I'm going to do my slip stitch. I'm going to switch to the new color, which is going to be the white yarn. I'm going to pull up a loop through that chain 2 space, and then through the loop that was on the hook, do the slip stitch. So you complete your slip stitch with the new color. And then I'm going to chain 3, and then I'm going to work over that tail just a little bit. So I'm going to pull that tail a little bit so it doesn't come loose, and then I'm going to do 2 double crochets into that chain 2 space, and then chain 2, and then I'm going to do 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space, and I'm working over that tail a little bit, that way I won't have to weave it in at the end. Okay, so there's my 6 double crochets with a chain 2 in between. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut the red yarn since I'm done with that. And then we're going to chain 2. And then we're going to work into the next chain 2 space. Just like we did with the solid color star, we're going to do the same exact thing for the second round. So we need to skip over the double crochets, find the next chain 2 space, and do our 3 double crochets. Then chain 2, and 3 double crochets right back into that same chain 2 space. And then chain 2. And then we're going to skip over the double crochets and find the next chain 2 space and do our 3 double crochets. Chain 2, 3 double crochets into the same chain 2 space. Chain 2. And just repeat that all the way around for each chain 2 space, just like we did in the previous one. So the next chain 2 space, 3 double crochets. Chain 2. And we're not going to work in the top of the double crochets, just like we did with the solid granny style crochet star. We're going to work only into the chain 2 spaces, so I'm going to go ahead and do my 3 double crochets. Chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. And then chain 2, and then find the next chain 2 space and do your 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 more double crochets. Okay, and do that all the way around. Just work in the chain 2 spaces, doing the 3 double crochets, chain 2, and then 3 double crochets into the same chain 2 space. So when I'm back to the last one, I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I finished working in the last chain 2 space, so now I'm ready to chain 2, and we're going to join with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3 that we did when we began the round. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch over to that chain 2 space. So I'm going to do a slip stitch into the top of the next 2 double crochets, and then I'm going to insert my hook into that chain 2 space, and rather than yarn over with the same color yarn, I'm going to change to the new color, and this time I'm going to change to the color blue. So I just inserted my hook into the chain 2 space. I'm not going to use the same color yarn to yarn over. I'm going to change to the new color yarn, and I'm going to pull that through the chain 2 space and then pull it through the loop that was on the hook to do my slip stitch. So now you're going to go ahead and chain 3. And then I'm going to work over that blue tail just a little bit so that way I won't have to weave it in. So now I'm going to do, I did my chain 3, so now I'm going to do my 2 double crochets just like we did for each point of the star. And then I'm going to chain 2 and 3 more double crochets right back into that chain 2 space. And I'm working over that little tail a little bit, that way I won't have to weave it in. So there's my point of my star. So that was a 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 more double crochets. We're going to chain 1, and then we're going to do a slip stitch into this next chain 2 space. Then chain 1, and then we're going to work into the next chain 2 space for the next point of our star. And then we're going to do the 3 double crochets into that chain 2 space. Chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. And chain 1 and do a slip stitch into the next chain 2 space. And then we're back to the next chain 2 space for the next point of our star. We're going to chain 1 and then find the next chain 2 space for the next point of your star and do your 3 double crochets. Chain 2, and then 3 more double crochets right back into that same chain 2 space. So we're working this star exactly the same way we did the solid granny star, except for we're just changing colors for each round. So we just finished the point of the star, so do your chain 1, slip stitch into the next chain 2 space, chain 1, and then work the point the same way, and we're just going to do that all the way around, just like we did this one. So I'll go ahead and put the camera on pause while I finish the next 2 points of my star. Okay, so I just worked my last point of my star, and then all that's left to do after doing the 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets, do a chain 1, slip stitch into this next chain 2 space, chain 1, and then join with a slip stitch to the top of that 3rd chain that we did when we began the round. Okay, now we have finished our crochet star with the color changes, so I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn to fasten off. Pull that tail through, give it a tug, fasten off, and then all that's left to do is weave in the tails. So I'll weave in the tails. I'll go ahead and put the camera on pause while I weave the tails in, and I'll be right back. Okay, so while I had the camera on pause, I went ahead and wove in all my tails, and now I have completely finished my granny style crochet star with the color changes. I hope that you enjoyed the tutorial today. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and like the video. I want to thank you for watching today, and have a great day.